one and all to our show. This is going to be terrible. We're three friends hanging out, talking about whatever seems interesting at the time. Don't say we didn't warn you, because we have. This is your warning. If this is your first time with us, I am James, one of your hosts.
I am Robert, another host.
And I'm Nathan, the final host.
He's the final host.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about the new reboot of Mortal Kombat, live-action film based on the popular video game franchise, released on April 23rd, 2021. Much like Godzilla vs. Kong, it was released simultaneously in theaters and on the streaming service HBO Max. How does this new reboot stack up versus our nostalgic memories of the original 1995 film? Will it be a flawless victory? Let's test our might. Fight!
So the story in this Mortal Kombat reboot is pretty surface level, I think. It kind of starts off covering what is in the majority of the newer games, the constant lifelong battle between the Lin Kuei and the Shirai Ryu, basically Scorpion's clan versus Sub-Zero's clan, and how that gets wrapped up in the overarching tournament between all of these different realms, Earth realm versus Outworld and all these other realms. And you have our main characters that are getting roped up into this tournament. Some of them are aware of what's going on. Some of them aren't. Some of them are prepared, some of them are not. And then, as usual, Outworld is trying to cheat, as they have done always in the video games, to try and get an upper hand in this tournament. Because if they win one more, they get to take over Earthrealm. And so we follow our characters or heroes throughout the film as they try to thwart Outworld's attempts at cheating, as well as the main character learning his place in the constant Lin Kuei versus Shirai Ryu war. I thought the story was okay. Like I said, there in my little brief synopsis, it's pretty surface level, I think, in my opinion, as far as Mortal Kombat lore and story goes. I played some of the games earlier on. I have not played some of the newer ones, like in the last couple generations, like 9, 10, and 11, and so on. But I am aware of the main storyline and some of the lore there. And so based on the information that I know, the story to me felt pretty surface level, which is okay if this is going to be, a new, 2, 3, 4, 5 movie run. I guess that's what they're shooting for here, maybe. Then it would make sense to kind of just, as usual, make the first movie, the intro movie, keep it pretty light, learn the main characters. There are a ton of characters in Mortal Kombat, so they pick the few that people really know, and a couple that I was surprised that they added. But, overall, I thought the story was okay. It was not terribly underwhelming, but it also didn't wow me. I kind of find myself going back to man, I really enjoyed the story in the 1995 film a little bit more than this one. I think it might have been down to pacing of the story. It felt a little slow to me at times. So yeah, not bad, not great.
I know nothing about Mortal Kombat. I never really played any of the games unless I was over at a friend's place and they just wanted to destroy me in Mortal Kombat because I don't know how to play fighting games. I have terrible reflexes. You could throw a ball at me and probably 2 years later I get around to start to raise my arm. Anyways, I'm not. And so I remember the day before I watched, I saw someone had commented go into the movie with and forget everything you know about the lore. And I was like, done. I had no expectations on what to see except for maybe someone shouting, "Get over here," or something like that. So I thought this, like Robert said, surface level, nothing wrong with that. I was still entertained by the story. It was way more of a story than I was expecting to come from a fighting game. I did like the very beginning arc between Sub-Zero and I think the guy who becomes Scorpion and just kind of setting up that whole rivalry. I thought that was really cool that they intertwined it a bit more and went into depth, at least with two of the characters. So yeah, I can't gripe about the story. I don't know how it could be better because I don't know anything about the lore, and I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, the story is definitely, to put it lightly, very surface level. Honestly, my main issue comes from the fact that, like Nathan pointed out, this beginning prologue with the Scorpion versus Sub-Zero clan stuff kind of has like a really like artsy feel to it, like a super serious tone. It's set in the 1600s. It's, a massacre of Scorpion's family and everything like that. And this is the 7 to 10 minutes that they put up online to as a preview to try to get everybody in. And it's like, oh, neat. If they keep this up for the rest of the movie, might actually be pretty good. Problem is, it just feels tonally different from the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie is just your typical cheesy schlock of people fighting, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it has this really big disconnect from the beginning. And maybe the movie would have been better if the beginning had not been there, because then I wouldn't have this disconnect going on. The other thing I have issue with is, especially when we come down to characters, if we talk about any of them, they don't spend a lot of time with a lot of the villain characters that admittedly just end up being cannon fodder because they want to show some gory R-rated kills. So a lot of these people are just going to die off anyway, but we really don't, like, other than having them name dropped and seeing them do a couple things, we don't know who or what or why these characters are. They're just there to be plopped down, literally having their guts fall out, or in some cases being split in half. So they probably could have done a better job with these characters. But overall, yeah, I think I'd gone back to rewatch the 95 film within the last week. And just so I can make sure that it wasn't just the nostalgia brain talking. And I think I did enjoy the 95 one better. It's also 10 minutes shorter than the 2021 reboot. So maybe that has something a little bit going for it. The 95 one is definitely a product of its time, the 90s. So, if you decide to go back and rewatch it for yourselves, that, go in just expecting that. The other thing this new reboot has going for it again is it's rated R, as opposed to the 95 version was PG-13. So the 90s one, they could get more butts in the seat with it being PG-13, but a lot of the super fans back then were critical of it because they could not do all of the gory fatalities justice. Well, here they definitely get that, and then some. Overall, though, again, story very surface level and basic. The last thing I'm going to say about it is it's really weird that they go ahead and call out the tournament and everything like that. And yes, Outworld cheats, but we don't even really get the tournament. It all feels like set up for maybe in the second movie we're going to get the actual tournament. And don't get me wrong, in the 95 original, like, its whole premise is they're going off to Shang Tsung's island to fight in the tournament, and we get a good 15 minutes of the movie showing, all right, here's some fights in a tournament setting of all these characters 1v1ing each other. And we sort of get that in the reboot at the end, but it just felt really, it felt like, all right, we've got 20 more minutes in this movie, we need to wrap it up, let's just teleport everybody where they need to go to fight each other and call it a day and hope we get our sequel. So it's hard to say that it's rushed because, again, this movie is longer than the other one. This one clocks in at about, I want to say, an hour and 50 minutes. So they had time to where they could have done something more of it. Like, we get a lot of time devoted to training and stuff and trying to explain away mystical powers with arcana, which, oh, a lot of that doesn't make sense either. We'll probably get into that maybe when we talk about Jax. I don't see how magic equates to robot arms, but again, I'm done talking about the story. We can jump to characters. How about that?
So, anyone want to list out the cast of characters that we have? There are quite a few of them.
Yeah, I'll list the characters real quick. We have Louis Tan is playing Cole Young. Jessica McNamee is playing Sonya Blade. Josh Lawson is playing Kano. Whoa, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Mehcad Brooks is playing Jax. Chin Han is playing Shang Tsung. Ludi Lin is playing Liu Kang. We have Joe Taslim as Sub-Zero. And I think those are all the major characters. Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
I mean, I think that's part of one of the issues with this movie is aside from the good guys, the bad guys are largely forgettable. James kind of mentioned that when he was kind of talking about how he felt about the story. I think that's my biggest thing here is the characters, for the most part, to me, even the good team feel largely forgettable. Cole, I guess I'll start with like the main character, Cole Young. We get very little information about him. He's a down on his luck, losing all the time boxer who can't seem to follow basic instructions to use his uppercut because it appears to be like the best move he has, but he refuses to use it for some reason. Watch the movie to get what I'm talking about. It comes up quite a couple times, and he never seems to use it when he actually should use it. Again, I think Nathan mentioned this in our last review. When we make comments about how poor the characters are, we are not commenting on the actors doing a bad job. I think, to get that out of the way, I think all the actors did a very good job with all of the characters. They were all believable. They played them all very well. There were characters that I enjoyed, but there are things that we're not going to like that are not their fault, that are simply issues that are either writing or, when we get to Mehcad Brooks, it's going to be, that because of previous roles, it's hard to like imagine them in other roles. And that's not necessarily their fault. They may have just performed that other role so well that it's ingrained in our brains. So I think all the actors did a fantastic job. However, the characters I don't think were written very well. They're largely forgettable. It's very hard to get behind them or like root for them in a sense, not because they're bad, but just because it's hard to identify with them. Sonya Blade, again, neat character, but it's I don't know how to explain other than that. The characters don't seem to be given much to do other than they're thrust into this situation and they have to deal with what's going on. And for the 2/3 of the film, they are doing a very bad job of dealing with what's going on. And you couldn't attribute that to like being thrown into a random situation, right? You could pick us up and pluck us into that situation, and what would we do? But like, they don't even react in ways that seem rational.
We would probably die in 2.5 seconds.
Correct. But the ways that they seem to react just don't really make sense, or at least drive the story in a way that makes you want to take interest in what's going to happen with these characters. But anyway, yeah, for me, the character's largely forgettable. Mehcad Brooks, it was really hard, really, really hard to not see Jimmy Olsen from Supergirl in that character. Hearing him curse and try to be tough was really difficult. I don't know if it was maybe didn't make his physical appearance impressive enough for someone like Jax, but it just, I don't know. I had a really hard time not seeing Jimmy Olsen in that character. But I will have to say that the standout character that is actually my favorite, that probably does actually have the best arc of the entire movie, is Kano. Like, he is absolutely hilarious. He's the best kind of bad guy because he's kind of starts on the good team and he's going to betray everybody, but you still kind of root for him because like he's just his comedic timing makes him kind of lovable. But his turn also makes sense. He's in it for himself. He gets offered a ton of money and he switches sides, and it's perfectly predictable. And the rest of the team should have seen it coming, and they kind of did, but didn't do anything to prepare for that. But that was probably the one character that I did enjoy the most, because of just how absolutely hilarious he was. And his story made the most sense out of anybody there. So I really enjoyed that character. But the rest of them, especially the bad guys, just like I I couldn't even list all the ones that were there. I know that there's some of the typical ones like Melina, and I think Ermac is there, but like
No, that's a negative there.
there's one of them. He has the dreads or
You're
whatever.
thinking Cabal.
Cabal is there, but like they don't do anything. They're there, they fight, they die, spoiler alert, and we move on. And that was a little disappointing that the characters are just made so largely forgettable. And none of them, other than really Kano, stands out. And then, spoiler alert, Kano doesn't even make it to the end of the movie. So, well, I mean, we don't necessarily see him a confirmed death, but I don't know, a gnome in the eye would probably kill a lot of people.
As laid out by the rules of the movie, when you die, you lose your dragon tattoo,
This
which
is
is
true.
your ticket into Mortal Kombat. They make a point of it transferring over to Sonya Blade. So I would say Kano's probably deado.
So there you go. The best character, arguably for me in the film, is dead. And then the two standout characters that they introduced you in the very beginning, and I agree with James when he made this assessment about the first 7 minutes, Scorpion and Sub-Zero don't really have a large presence in the movie. They kind of have like this presence that like that their story's kind of involved in it, but they didn't do a really good job of showing how connected it was, because it really only revolves around Cole Young and the character isn't written very well. So like you see these two characters at the very beginning and you are very interested in what is going on between these two warring clans, and then they dismiss that and it doesn't really come back up until the very end of the movie. And even then it's just a fight to save Cole Young's family and not really anything to do with this 100 years feud, hundreds of years feud. So even those two characters that I really was like, oh, this is really cool, they're going to center around the Lin Kuei versus Shirai Ryu story, which is a big thing in the games. And then they're like, let's press pause on that, and then not really ever bring it back up for the rest of the movie. So I was disappointed to not see more in those two characters either, especially the fact that Scorpion proper only really shows up for like the last 10 minutes of the movie, maybe, if that.
Yeah, that prequel they did, I really loved it, as I think we've all mentioned already. And I was hoping it would carry through a little bit better. And they could have done little things too, like, because they make it a point that Cole Young was a descendant of Scorpion. They could have done something with Kano, where maybe he not necessarily is a descendant, but maybe he was a student of Sub-Zero's. Like his great grandfather was a student of Sub-Zero's, and then that lessons got passed down. So he's like, oh yeah, this is the technique passed down to my generation that my great grandfather learned, and then they come to find out it's Sub-Zero's teaching or something. That way, that rivalry can kind of persist. That way, you have Sub-Zero versus Scorpion and Cole Young versus Kano. That would help kind of like bring that rivalry all together. But they didn't really.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to stop you right there, Nathan.
Sure.
If you're gonna do a Kano, you gotta put the Australian in it.
Yeah, shrimp on the barbie. Crikey.
Wallow, mate.
You see my knife?
That's not a knife. I mean, that's not a knife.
It's an imaginary knife.
I don't have a spoon laying around, so I can be like, that's a knife. Anyways, but yeah, like they could have done better to help. And then, like Robert said, Kano was definitely my favorite character, and I was sad when he turned evil. Again, it was expected. I knew it was coming, but still, it's just like, oh, I didn't want him to die. I didn't want him to not be around anymore. I wanted to see more of him. And I didn't like either how they handled Cole Young, and that how Robert mentioned that he doesn't do things he's supposed to, but they never give him a reason why he never does things. Like he could throw out a line of like, I don't want to use the uppercut because I always win when I use the uppercut, and just him like holding himself back for whatever reason. He's got to learn not to hold back when he actually gets to the Mortal Kombat stuff. Then like they make a point too of showing his daughter every time, like, oh, I got to think about my family. And then you see her daughter, and it's just like, oh, okay, he's a family man. We get it. He's fighting for his family. That's supposed to be his motivation. But they never really like say that's his motivation. They just kind of imply that it is. And and then like I don't know any of the characters. I definitely didn't know any of the bad guys. I think I recognized the guy who had 4 arms. seen him on some artwork before.
Goro.
Sure, I have no clue. So I mean, like the fighting of all these characters was really great, but then I knew nothing about the bad guys except for the bad guys always cheat, and they're here to cheat some more so they can take over the earth. And hooray, they didn't.
For now. I mean, they definitely are banking on getting a sequel out of this, so we'll see what happens with that. Personally, for me, going through the list, so they have the prequel, set it up as Scorpion versus Sub-Zero, big feud and everything, and they don't follow through with it until the end, like Nathan and Robert have pointed out. And it's really weird that that's all the marketing was pretty much focused on. You see the poster, you see a split, here's half a Scorpion's mask, here's half the Sub-Zero's mask. So you're thinking maybe, hey, these guys are going to be the main characters and they're going to be the main focus. And they're not. Cole Young, who is our, I guess, POV character coming out from the outside looking in at all of this Mortal Kombat stuff going on, he is a wholly original character. He does not come from the games. And I guess I can sort of get what they're wanting to do with that, but they could have easily have just done what they did in the 95 one, where that role was sort of filled by Johnny Cage. And he's traditionally in a lot of the ways they tell the tournament story for the first few games. That's how they do it. You have Hollywood actor Johnny Cage coming in and he doesn't know what's going on, and then he just adapts to whatever it is and fight. Instead, they try to give us Cole Young, which that's not a great name. I don't know. It just doesn't kind of roll off the tongue like a Sonya Blade or a Liu Kang or anything like that. I don't know. But I kind of felt they dropped the ball here because they kept teasing out that he's being haunted by Scorpion's ghost. And I thought, all right, maybe they're going to set it up to like, maybe he's going to be the new Scorpion or something. Maybe it's going to get passed down to him. No, they're just going to say that he's got this blood relation and that somehow causes him to free Scorpion from the nether realm hell place. And then at the end, Scorpion just kind of like is, see ya, I'm free, thanks. So I don't know, maybe we'll get Scorpion in a sequel, but I felt this was a missed opportunity with their one new original character. They could have turned him into a Scorpion. That would have been fun. And we've got Sonya Blade. I don't want to keep comparing it to the 95 one, but I think they kind of did a better job there too. They're kind of similar in the way that she's supposed to be this strong, independent military woman. So I guess, yay, that's her character. I will agree, Kano is probably the standout from the hero slash villain side. They definitely give him the most material to kind of have the audience have fun with. He seems to be the most jokey and is just, he kind of goes along with everything. A lot of them do, but he realizes that it's just crazy, insane insanity and goes with it. When you have his first fight, he's ripping out the heart of a giant lizard man and just kind of watches it beating there in his hands. Okay, how can you not get behind this character? You especially want to be behind him. You don't want to be in front of him because you don't want him to rip out your heart either. I'm just saying. Much like Robert, I agree. Makad Brooks as Jax. I also watched Supergirl, and it is this really big disconnect here. I mean, it's not the fault of the character Jax. It's just I'm not used to Makad Brooks going around cursing up a storm and all this stuff. And I think, as I mentioned previously earlier, so the whole premise is they all have this dragon tattoo. They're all in the tournament. The dragon tattoo gives them access to what they refer to as an arcana, sort of like, here's your magic power, and it manifests in people differently, and that's all well and good. Liu Kang gets some fireballs. Kano gets a laser eye, which again, I don't understand. If they want to call this magic, cool, fine. How is this supposed to be mixed with potential technology like a laser eye? Like, you can maybe say, okay, it's magical laser beams or something. But there's a really weird disconnect when you try to say, okay, Jax's Arcana is he had his arms cut off by Sub-Zero at the start of the movie, and he gets little chicken robot arms at one point, and he's not happy with them. Cool. His Arcana is to beef up these chicken arms into his traditional, giant, muscly, mecha, shiny arms. And I don't understand this mix here. Like, if you want to give him his robot arms, that's fine. Just give him his robot arms. It doesn't need to be tied to his magical powers or whatever. The rules presented within the movie felt weird. And again, Makan Brooks as Jax felt weird just because I wasn't used to him being that way. Liu Kang, Ludi Lin, he's Liu Kang. He's not that much different from the 95 original. The 95 original he was sort of the main character. He was a chosen one. This Liu Kang isn't as much focused on, but he does have that kind of he has that little arc going with his cousin Kung Lao. And when Kung Lao dies, it falls upon Liu Kang to kind of step up in his role within Raiden's, I don't know, monk organization. So, I don't know. Liu Kang was fine. Fireballs. I don't think he did his little hurricane bicycle kick.
I think he does.
Does he?
I think he does. Yes.
Okay, I misremember. I know he did it in the 95 one for sure. I couldn't remember if he did it here. But, I don't know. Liu Kang was fine. Sub-Zero on the villain side. You know what? I think I might have preferred this movie if they were just wanting to sort of ditch the tournament stuff, which they kind of do. Why not? The way they set up the start of the movie in present day, where he's, trying to assassinate a lot of the potential Mortal Kombat Earthrealm combatants, I would have preferred to see a Sub-Zero as like a Jason from Friday the 13th, like slasher type villain. Like, have him chasing everybody around the entire movie. Let's see that, maybe. That would have been cool. Have him freeze a bunch more people's arms and maybe even legs off. And we have Scorpion, Hanzo Hasashi. I don't think we named him earlier, played by Hiroyuki Sanada. The one thing I'll give this movie, they made a point to get people who could do the actual like martial arts in the fights. The fights in this movie are pretty good, so that's definitely a point in favor of it. I remember reading that they hired Hiroyuki specifically because he could do all of these stunts by himself, and the portrayal we get of him in the prologue again is great. When they bring him back at the end, that's fine. He's basically just playing a vengeful spirit from hell, and that comes across good. I think the last good guy, I guess, to talk about, this is Kung Lao. I briefly mentioned him earlier with Liu Kang. They're kind of a 2-for-1 package deal. Kung Lao seems to be, he is going to be the chosen one, but then he ends up dying. I don't know. He's got a cool razor blade hat that he uses quite effectively. But then he dies. His soul is taken by Shang Tsung. So, not much really to talk about with Kung Lao. And speaking of not much to talk about, the rest of the villains other than Sub-Zero and Shang Tsung, I guess. Shang Tsung doesn't really do much in this either. He just kind of like prances around. At one point, he sucks somebody's soul, and at the end, he's the survivor that's like, all right, well, I'm going to get you all next time. I'm going to bring armies instead of individual dudes, which, all right, why didn't you do that in the first place, man? Whatever. All of the villains, most of them, again, they're just cannon fodder. They are there because most of them are second, maybe even third tier villains that they knew they could afford to kill and not necessarily have to bring back in any sequels. Natara, I believe, was the giant vampire bat lady, gets cut in half by Kung Lao's hat. You have a big hammer guy, Raiko. I don't know. again, second and third tier characters I don't even remember from the games. I think they showed up in later ones, which I did not play. The only one that really is recognizable, I guess, is Melina, but I don't know. It's really weird to have her here and not also have the one hero character that she's connected to, Katana. So I'm not sure why they chose to have her in here, but not Katana. I don't know. She's got razor sharp teeth. Neat. Other than Kano, who eventually turns bad, the one villain that does stand out is Cabal to me. He sort of is like, I guess, an ex-partner of Kano's. They both worked in the Black Dragon mercenary group or something. It's really weird. Cabal almost feels like he came out of another movie or game series. Like he shows up on screen, and at first he looked like he's in some sort of like armor. He calls it an iron lung or whatever, something, but he's completely helmeted and armored up, and he almost looked to me like a Destiny character a little bit. It's maybe not so much a like one of the Destiny hero characters, but maybe like one of the Fallen characters with all the weird like uh, pipes and stuff coming out of his face. And it's just then his voice comes out, and it's like this really weird disconnect between it, but it sort of worked in its own way. He gets to antagonize Kano and bring him over to the villain side. He's got some sort of like super speed dash, which he uses to abuse Liu Kang. I don't know. I enjoyed what they did with Cabal. But yeah, overall, the characters, all the villains were just kind of blah. The only other thing I want to say about characters is, I guess, some of the costuming. I wasn't a super fan of the final choices for at least Sub-Zero and Scorpion. The one thing I really remember from the 90s movie and the earlier games is these bright colors when you come to the palette swap ninjas, as they're usually referred to, because they're basically to save time and money in the earlier games. It's like, all right, we need an extra character. Cool, let's put a new color on this ninja character, and now we're gonna have and give him a couple new moves. So we're gonna have a yellow ninja and a blue ninja and a green ninja and etc. and so on. And they were all these, bright hues of these colors. And much like a lot of superhero movies nowadays, instead of things being all bright and shiny, we get these very muted blue and yellow, and it does not stand out to me, and I was not a fan of those particular costuming choices. But yeah, I'm done with the characters for now. There's too many.
I one last character that I don't know if all of us brought up, and that may just be a commentary again on how forgettable these people are, is Raiden played a very big role in the 95 film. And in this one, he's like barely there. He shows up, kind of just complains about how they all don't have their arcana and they're basically screwed, throws up a layer of protection around their temples so they can continue to train and unlock their arcana, and then just kind of helps them teleport where they need to when Cole Young comes up with his clearly writer's room plan for getting everybody where they need to be at the last moment. And so he comes off as kind of a bit of a jerk. And I know we talk about not wanting to compare it to the 95 films a lot, but I mean, up top, didn't we mention, kind of how it stood up to the nostalgia of the 95 film? So in that movie, Raiden seems to be way more concerned and way more involved with getting Earthrealm prepared for this fight. Whereas this Raiden is like kind of very hands-off, leaving Liu Kang and Kung Lao to do the brunt of the training to unlock their arcana. But what stood out to me the most is just how kind of like, I don't know, like over Earthrealm he felt, like just kind of like, oh, well, you all suck. Looks like we're going to lose anyway. Oh, by the way, Outworld is cheating, so we're screwed. Peace out, guys. And so it just was really weird to see Raiden be so like absent from the involvement of getting Earthrealm prepared for this fight, given what I know about the games too, where he is super involved as well, just like he was in the 95 films. So, but anyway.
To be fair, again, having rewatched the 95 film within the last week, their level of involvement is more or less the same, honestly. Like Raiden in both versions has the stipulation from the games of like, yeah, he's supposed to be hands off. He can't directly compete in the tournament. He's not supposed to be. He's not supposed to be doing anything to affect the tournament other than, gathering the fighters. Ultimately, yes, he does by teleporting everybody everywhere where they need to go. But I would say both versions have that bit of like, hands off as much as they can. But the new one in this reboot, he definitely is a bit more standoffish in that he's kind of rude to everybody.
He reminded me of Zhang Zhang from Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you guys remember that character who first tried to teach Aang how to firebend.
So, visuals. I think the movie looks fantastic. This is probably what stands out the most to me, and why ultimately I did enjoy this movie is that the fights and the visuals are very impressive. The CG work was really good. I thought the fatalities looked pretty much as good as they do in the games. Better, obviously, because the games are going to look a little more like a video game, and these look a little more realistic. But what I meant is like the ooh, wow, that really must have hurt that we get from the games is definitely communicated in the artwork done in this movie. I was surprised that given that it was rated R, you'd figure they'd go a little bit further than they did. And I don't know if they went far enough. The games are certainly way worse than what some of the things they pull off in this movie, in my opinion, anyway. Still very gruesome.
I was gonna say, chopped in half by a razor blade hat, clapping somebody's head smushed like a watermelon. I'm not sure what else you're looking for.
I'm not.
Here.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not saying like I wanted it to be more gory.
Jax's arms? Do you not feel for Jax's arms?
I don't, honestly. Poor Jimmy Olsen. I'm not saying that I wanted it to be more gory. I'm just saying that I'm surprised, given that it was rated R and they wanted this to look and feel more like the games than previous movies and web series and whatever, that it seemed like they were holding back just a little bit. Like when you watch the fatalities in the game, it definitely lingers. The point is to disgust you and like, wow, holy crap, that must have been extremely painful. And here it's over quickly. So it just, again, it's not a knock on the visuals. I'm just surprised that they didn't take it a little bit further. Not that I necessarily wanted or needed that. But again, fight scenes look great. Visuals, CG work is fantastic. The fights look really good. It was good that they got people in here that know how to do the moves and perform, the martial arts well and correctly. Definitely shows in this movie, and it's probably the reason why I enjoy it. I enjoyed it. But yeah, the movie looks good. I like that.
The only thing I would want to add on is they probably didn't do too much with the fatalities so that they had more to do for the next movie. They kind of held themselves back. That way they could do even more for the next installment, assuming it comes out. Because they were still pretty brutal for a standalone movie, but now they have some place to grow into if they are able to get another one off the shelf.
Yeah, kind of like you thought it was disgusting in part 1. Wait till part 2.
Right.
Yeah, again, I'm gonna disagree with you, Robert. The fatalities were plenty brutal and fatal to me as it was. Again, getting chopped in half by a hat, watermelon smush head, like the arm decapitation from Jax. I'm trying to think of what else maybe stood out. The soul sucking wasn't, it was your typical like, oh no, this guy's going all skeletal like. So that wasn't particularly like bloody or guts and gore. Oh, guts and gore. Hey, Kano ripping out Reptile's heart. So yeah, I would think the most muted you could probably say is, again, the beginning prologue, the fight with Scorpion, and Sub-Zero, and Scorpion dying. He gets stabbed by the knife a couple times or whatever. That's probably the most subdued as far as deaths come in this movie. And then none of this is meant as a knock. This is more of just like, again, I think that they did perfectly fine with what they were aiming to do, which is, I think, I'm assuming by now people have taken these clips of these fatalities and been like, hey, let's compare them to how it looks in the newer generation of games, the last three or so. And I would say they line up pretty well. They have the characters in the game, the movie mimicking what the characters in the games would do for their fatalities and moves and everything. So yeah, I thought the visuals on that were really good. The visuals for the completely CGI character of Goro, on the other hand, the giant four-armed muscle freak, I was not a fan of. It, I don't know. He has that problem of a lot of completely CGI characters of not feeling like he's there. He's not feeling like he's real. It's something that like Marvel has sort of conquered by now with their giant CGI characters of like Hulk and Groot and Rocket and etc. and so on. But yeah, they could have done a better job on Goro. It's a little better than the 95 version, which was, I think, a combination guy in like a giant puppet suit, maybe some stop motion. It was hard to tell what they did for the 95 Goro, but he didn't look very good either. But I don't know. The rest of the visuals for the movie were fine. I think, like I mentioned, some of the costume choices I was not a fan of, but overall, that the movie was competently done visually.
So what do we think of this movie versus the 95?
Ooh, I'll start. I don't remember how the 95 movie went because I watched it so long ago and didn't have a chance to rewatch it for this review.
Okay, well then I guess I'll go next. Thank you, Nathan, for nothing. If we're judging these movies in the context of the time in which they were released, so it is not fair to compare 2021 Mortal Kombat visuals to 95 visuals because the technology and the techniques and the skills were not where they were like they are now. So taking that into mind, looking at the various bits that we've talked about here, story, casting characters, visuals, I think the story in 95 worked out a little bit better for me than in this version, especially just because they threw in that Cole Young character. And I think that kind of threw a wrench in things, as well as bringing up the Lin Kuei versus Shirai Ryu and then just abandoning it. I think 95 did a better story-wise by just sticking to the tournament angle and following that through all the way to the end without adding any extra unnecessary things. Characters wise, again, Cole Young, I don't know why he was why we needed him for this. I think there are plenty of characters in Mortal Kombat that they could pull from. Again, they started with Lin Kuei versus Shirai Ryu. You're going to hear me say this a lot because they should have stuck with that the entire way. And I feel like characters wise, Cole Young just kind of throws everything for a loop. And I liked that the 95 stuck with the characters that we knew at the time and used them all very well and effectively. I don't believe that this movie did a very good job of that, of using every character effectively.
But not only that, but like, so with Cole Young, they make a point at the end to tease that, oh, hey, he's going to go get Johnny Cage if we get a sequel. Why not just have Johnny Cage here to begin with?
Exactly. Comparing characters, Liu Kang 95 versus Liu Kang 21, the Liu Kang 95, I identified with way more. Like the 21 felt very like a little too, they're both monks. They're both kind of like, service first, fight second kind of thing. The fighting is necessary, but they're living a life of servitude. And that was all well and good, but like I don't know, like the 21 Liu Kang felt very weak, very like Kung Lao is the chosen one, and I'm just here as a stand-in in case something happens to him, and I'm just gonna sit here. And I'm not saying he's not formidable. He can kind of hold his own, but he just like, I don't know, the portrayal of the character I liked way more in 95. And maybe it's because, that Liu Kang in 95 fits more of the Liu Kang that we see throughout the games as the game had evolved through our lifetime. Whereas the Liu Kang in 21, in my opinion, does not fit the Liu Kang we see in the games. And maybe that's what is throwing me off. So characters wise, I like the way they were handled. I like the group of characters we get and the way they were handled in 95 better. Visuals, again, like I said, we don't want to judge these two too closely because we got to keep in context. I think the visuals that were there in 95 worked for the time the movie came out. It's all very early CG stuff and everything. So, it is what it is. Some of it doesn't hold up. But when I watched it as a kid, I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I thought it was really freaking cool. And it looked really freaking cool. And now I'm watching 21, and as an adult, I think it looks really freaking cool. So in this sense, for visuals, I think they're both on equal footing for me. So if we're using these three categories, story, characters, and visuals, 95 wins out for me. I think it's got the better story, and I think it uses its cast a lot more effectively, the characters a lot more effectively than 21 does. And since their visuals are equal, that doesn't give 21 anything over 95, in my opinion. Now, does that mean I don't like Mortal Kombat 21? No. I enjoyed the movie. Had a fun ride. It was cool. When Mortal Kombat 2 comes out, if it comes out, I will watch it because I am a fan of the series. But when it comes to which one holds that special place in my heart that I will probably rewatch over and over and over again, 95 gets that title for me.
Yeah, I've already brought up a bunch of my comparisons to the 95 one before. So I guess maybe I'll throw it for a loop and compare it to the 2020 animated movie they put out, Mortal Kombat Legends, Scorpion's Revenge, which I also watched this past week. Again, it follows the tried and true. There's a Mortal Kombat tournament to determine whether Outworld takes over Earthrealm. So they've got that going there, much like the live action movie reboot. It has a prologue where it focuses on the Scorpion Sub-Zero clan fight, and it does a pretty good job there too. Admittedly, when it comes to visuals and stuff, the animated one has it's animated, so it can do basically whatever it wants. It does a lot of focus on, again, the fatalities, and you've got Scorpion there chopping people to bits because it's animated. It's easy for them to do it. They don't have to put a lot into like visual effects to make it live action and stuff. They also do a point in the animated one of in the later games, they did a lot of, I think they were called like X-ray moves or something. Basically, when you would see somebody get hit, you would see a bunch of their bones breaking and see how it's affecting them. So they do a lot of that in this animated movie. So I thought that was pretty good. Honestly, I think if I were to kind of like rank what we have as far as Mortal Kombat movies, which is easy enough because there are just the 4 of them, I think I might prefer to rewatch the animated, Scorpion's Revenge movie, just because it focuses more on the whole Scorpion thing, hence the subtitle. You do get a lot of the other, Earthrealm characters. You get Liu Kang, you get Johnny Cage, no Cole Young there. You get Sonya Blade. So and actually they do have brief little cameos by other people that are probably going to be, if the animated movie gets a sequel, they're going to focus more on. But they only have this core of like 4, maybe 5 people they focus on, which is great. This live action one we just watched maybe focused a little too far on too many people and stuff going on. Like we didn't even really mention much of Cole's family that were around for a good chunk of the movie. But yeah, I think I would prefer to rewatch the animated one, then probably the 95 movie, then this reboot, and skip a couple hundred rungs, and then you get the Annihilation sequel to the 90s movie. Because I don't know if any of you all have seen that at any point, but don't. Please don't.
Is it as bad as the first Star Trek movie?
Well, are we talking as in literally first talking Shatner and company?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's been forever since I've seen that, so I don't want to completely knock it. I know it's a bit slow from what I recall. I don't remember it being terrible, terrible. I don't know. I would probably have to give that a rewatch before I could accurately say it. But no, given that that was in, I believe, the 70s or maybe early 80s, yeah, I would say original Star Trek motion picture is probably better than Annihilation.
It's bad, Nathan.
Annihilation is bad enough that they only have two of the main cast from 95 Mortal Kombat return. They had to recast everybody else because nobody else wanted to be in it.
They should have annihilated the people that made that.
Yeah, you get Liu Kang, you get Katana, that's it. So it was a really weird disconnect between the fact that I watched them, 95 and Annihilation, like one day and one the next. They they make a point, just as a small tangent, of at the start of Annihilation being like, "Oh, here's Lord Raiden, talking about what happened in the previous movie," and we see the archival footage of, here's what happened in Mortal Kombat, and it's just scenes that focus on Liu Kang because he's one of the two returning actors. You don't see anybody else because when they pop up on screen, it's like, oh hey, that's not the Sonya Blade or Johnny Cage that I remember. That's definitely not the Lord Raiden that I remember from the previous movie. It's maybe we'll watch it sometime just to mock it.
Pass. I'd rather be annihilated.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say about comparing this new Mortal Kombat to previous ones.
So to wrap up, I think I've said it enough already. Mortal Kombat 2021, not bad, not great. Anybody else want to say anything?
What more can be said about it? I mean, it was a fun ride, and me not knowing much about Mortal Kombat, okay, it was a good enough film. Let's move on to the next one,
Hmm?
Yeah, I think we've all more or less said what we were going to say about Mortal Kombat 2021. It was okay to me personally. It was fine. I'm not a super big fan of it. If there's a sequel and it's not going to cost me much or anything to watch it, I will probably watch it. It's not anything I'm going to actively try to follow, though, especially since they're probably going to bring Cole Young back again.
Terrible times.
All right, so we'll move on to Terrible Times. This is a segment where we cover things that we are watching or into since the last episode. I have been watching Bad Batch that has started on May 4th, and it is enjoyable. If you loved Clone Wars, you will love this. If you love the Bad Batch arc of the final season of the Clone Wars, you will like Bad Batch. It's great. It's more Star Wars. I love the characters. The new character is very intriguing. I am interested in seeing where it goes. But what I really wanted to share was that I have been rewatching Big Bang Theory. I watched it as it was releasing when it was on air, and I had not watched it in quite a long time. And I didn't start from the very beginning. I picked up, I want to say, around like season 8 or 9, because I wanted to skip the majority of the early stuff. I was just kind of feeling nostalgic. I saw it was on HBO Max. This was shortly after watching Mortal Kombat, actually. And I was like, oh, I'll watch a couple episodes. It's been a very long time since I've seen anything. And I kind of got rehooked again and have been rewatching it since. I just started the final season the other day. So I know, I mean, I hear a lot online that Big Bang Theory kind of gets a bad rap for some reason. And for some reason, it just got a bad online following. Or not a following, but like just it gets a bad rap online. People say that it wasn't great. I've seen memes that go out of their way to talk about how Big Bang Theory wasn't funny. And I don't know. I watched it and I still think some of it's pretty funny. So I've been watching that. And if you've got HBO Max, I thought it was a decent sitcom at its time. And if you're into nerd culture and all things science fiction and whatever, I think it's worth a watch or rewatch.
Yeah, the last couple of weeks I've been making my way through a rewatch as well. I've been rewatching the animated Spectacular Spider-Man series that aired back in 2008 and 2009 on the Kids WB block on the CW. This one was to me, a really, really good adaptation of Spider-Man. It was the showrunner for it was Greg Weisman, who I believe did Gargoyles back in the 90s, and then he would go on from this series to do DC's Young Justice, which also turned out pretty good. So I had already been a fan of him from Gargoyles when Spectacular Spider-Man came on. And it is a Spider-Man series that was kind of, cut short before its time. Again, it was in 2008, 2009, which was right around the time that Disney acquired Marvel. And unfortunately, when that happened, Disney basically was like, all right, we're gonna do a clean slate on all of our animated and TV stuff. So anything that's currently airing, especially Spectacular Spider-Man, which is tied to Sony, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and cancel these, and we are going to do new versions of these. So unfortunately, this was just a 2-series run. It's 26 episodes. It's not even available for streaming on Disney Plus. I have a Blu-ray copy of it, of the complete series, which I have to pull out and put the discs in. What? Put discs in a machine? Sorcery. But yeah, it's worth a watch. It adapts a lot of the early 60s comic runs and updates them obviously for current stuff, and it does a really good blend of the Spider-Man stuff with Peter Parker's high school antics going around. And I would definitely recommend it to anybody who is a Spider-Man fan and may have missed it because it was cut short.
I've been getting a lot of recommendations on YouTube since I listen to YouTube while I work for YouTubers playing through a game called Papers, Please. And so I've been listening to it and their reactions and them trying to decide what to do. The whole premise of the game is that you're like a border crossing guard and you're either you're denying entry or allowing people to come into your country. It's a made up country that closely resembles like Russia and Kazakhstan and areas or countries just in that area. And so then there's these B plots of, do you allow certain terrorists in because they bribe you or because they're fighting for the right of the people? And do you stop the uprising? Do you let it happen? And it's pretty interesting, all the different scenarios that I come up with. And so I actually went ahead and bought it on Steam. It's only like $10. And I started playing it, and it's all right. And all you got to do is just keep checking back and forth on documents, make sure names match, birth dates, weights, that kind of stuff. But then I realized I'm just working playing this game, and that is not why I need to play a game right now, is to continue working. So I played maybe 20 minutes of it and then stopped. Fun game to listen to, fun game to watch. I just, as of right now with my work schedule, I don't think I can play it, and that's a shame because it is a really cool game, a really neat premise, and they did it really well. It's just a bad time in my life for it right now.
Well, that wraps up our review of Mortal Kombat 2021. Let us know what you thought in the comments. Thanks for joining us this week. Be sure to leave those comments below. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app, you can check out our Facebook page. Just search for This Is Going to Be Terrible Podcast and leave us feedback there. No matter what, feel free to give us a like, subscribe, hit a bell, leave us a review, shout it out from the rooftops, whatever you like. Just get over here and leave your comment. We appreciate the feedback from you, our audience, and who knows, maybe one day you too can get a shout out from us in our next episode. But until then, bye.
And later.
Be good to each other out there.